the top focus on Newstrack. One of the newest pieces of propaganda coming out of China this very tense season in Ladakh actually came out just this morning. And it was a video that I'm going to show you in a short while in a report, showing their tanks beating our tanks. That's what they wanted to show. And it carried a very threatening message saying Indian tanks will stand no chance against the Chinese tanks. Well, in a moment you'll see that report. But before that, I want to show you how tanks are deployed in Ladakh right now. There are lots of battle tanks deployed in Ladakh. That's one thing that's absolutely certain. You've got everything from India's T-72 tanks. You've got Chinese T-15 tanks on the Spangor-So bank. This is just south of Pangong. Many more tanks are being added with each passing day. In other places like Rechinla, there are T-90 tanks that have rolled up very close to Chinese positions. Similarly, Chinese tanks have also rolled up, tried to dislodge Indian posts from the dominating heights in eastern Ladakh. You've got T-90 tanks also in Depsang. You've got T-15 tanks also in Depsang. You've got T-88 tanks of the Chinese also there. And you've got Indian T-90 tanks. So lots of jargon sounds like, but it's not. There are lots of tanks deployed. That's all you need to know as you watch this report, because this makes it very specific. Propaganda is one thing, but this takes warmongering to an all new level. Take a look.
Right before Corps Commander level talks, this latest piece of warmongering propaganda from China, designed to heighten temperature in typical Xi Jinping style. But hidden in this aggressive image, which explicitly claims to depict tank-destroying exercises in Tibet, is an admission of something else. A powerful indicator that the Chinese have been spooked by Indian tank movements in eastern Ladakh. Let's try and decode why the Chinese would fire such an obvious and specific propaganda bullet, illustrating the destruction of tanks. The immediate trigger for this propaganda assault appears to be the fact that Chinese tank units are fully in Indian sights following the Indian Army's preemptive actions on August 29. Chinese Type 88 tank units are now within line of sight from dominant heights now held by the Indian Army. That's not all. Chinese tanks, which had rumbled close to the heights held by the Indian Army, had to hold position for another reason.
Assume that this is the south bank of the Pangong So. Behind me, you can see the beautiful Pangong So Lake. And also behind me are the locations where the Indian forces have occupied some strategic heights. Now, as a result of this action by the Indian forces, tanks on both sides have come very close to each other. Now, the red line you see is the line of actual control. You can see Chinese tanks which have been stopped in their tracks by decisive Indian force action, but there are also Indian tanks that are already deployed in the plains of Chushul that have been lying in wait, as a result of which just 9.5 kilometers separates tank groups on both sides. And anyone will tell you that 9.5 kilometers is a mere nothing when it comes to tank warfare.
In northern Ladakh, Depsang Plains area, a big Chinese build-up in Aksai Chin has forced the Indian Army to deploy armoured vehicles in a big way in this area, including an entire T-90 tank regiment. This too appears to have caught China's attention and possibly foiled attempts to mount more hostile actions in this very sensitive sector. The tanks being wielded by the two Chinese in eastern Ladakh is now well known. But the Chinese are clearly looking to up the ante. While China deploys the Type 15 light tank and the older Type 88 main battle tank, India deploys the T-72 and the more capable T-90 Bhishma, its mainstay in the armoured corps. War isn't a video game, and must never be treated as such. Having said that, all of these tanks are capable and warfare between them, while a remote possibility still sits on a razor's edge. As the two sides await the next talks engagement between military commanders. Tank commanders on the frontier will be exercising maximum caution in the face of non-stop provocation. With Shivarur, Bureau Report, India Today.
And remember, none of this is a video game, none of this is a joke. It's an extremely serious business. There are men risking their lives on the frontier as China tries to ratchet up these tensions. They've put out a video showing them destroying tanks as part of an exercise as an obvious threat to the Indian Army. Take a look at the kinds of tanks that are deployed there. This is just purely for your information. There are Type 88 tanks that are being deployed by the Chinese. There are T-90 tanks that have been deployed there by the Indian Army. There are Type 15 tanks that have been deployed there by the Chinese Army in different places, including in South Pangong. And there are T-72 tanks also deployed by the Indian Army. So at least four different types of armored tanks have been deployed in this area, and the provocations are at fever pitch by the Chinese. I want to go across now to Colonel Rohit Dev, who is a mechanized infantry veteran from the Indian Army. We also have Sushant Sareen with us. He's one of India's best-known strategic affairs commentators. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. In a short moment from now, we'll be joined by more experts. Colonel Dev, coming to you first. You saw the video that the Chinese had put out today. It's only the very latest in what is seen as a, very visible heightening of propaganda virulence from the Chinese side through Global Times and through others since August the 29th. Today they had videos of their, systems destroying tanks, and it actually had a clear warning within it. This is what will happen to Indian tanks. Are they spooked by the Indian armor? What's going on?
Shiv, somebody can masquerade to be whatever they want to, but the moot point is this masquerading will not help the Chinese cause. The terrain affords a pitched and tank versus tank battle or mechanized forces battle on the Tibetan plateau. And that is what the Chinese are spooked, because the domination of the ground and the tank runs is currently with the Indian side. And the Indian side, since June end, has very cautiously deployed enough quantum of mechanized forces in these areas. And when you see the weapon effectiveness index of what we have and what China has, it may have numbers. I'm not denying that. But the weapon effectiveness index, which is in our favor, coupled with the capability to drop BMPs, ICVs on C-130s into the Tibetan plateau, with the attack Hepters array which we have got there, which have been flying there for the last 3.5 months, I don't think so. China has got a chance in these limited corridors to have a design of ingress, because on this side of the LAC between India and...
Okay, we'll re-establish that link with Colonel Rohit Dev in a moment. But I also want to welcome onto our coverage Einar Tanjan. He's a political commentator from Beijing, and Lieutenant General B.S. Jaswal, who's a former Northern Army commander. Before I go to my other guests, here are some questions that I wish to ask here on the news track this evening. Let's cycle through the 5 big questions that we're asking this evening on News Track. Question number 1, why this spike in this virulent Chinese propaganda? They're saying Indian troops are worthless, Indian tanks will be destroyed. It's become very, very, ugly, vulgar, very, very specific. There's no respect in this propaganda. Number 2, why the spike in this bile right before corps commander level talks? 2 minister level talks have happened just now. The corps commanders are going to be talking. Both sides have agreed. So why this virulence? Question 3, is this the usual Chinese mind games, or is there something else afoot? We've seen mind games like this before, but is it only that and nothing else, or is there something else? Question number 4, is this Chinese rhetoric a sign of frustration? Frustration born from the Indian Army's actions since August the 29th to take some dominant positions in eastern Ladakh. And finally, question number 5, is China couching its true designs with these mind games? Because one wonders, we've always seen propaganda from China. There's always warmongering, there's always virulence, but there is something ugly that has happened in the Chinese propaganda in just the last 2 weeks, and one is wondering what that is really about. Einar Tangent, I'd like to put that question to you. You know, one cannot differentiate at this time between the Chinese government and Global Times. It is state-affiliated media. And right on the threshold of another round of corps commander level talks, for the Chinese government to have its attack dog say Indian troops cannot survive at high altitudes, you know, Indian tanks will be destroyed by Chinese tanks. What's going on? I mean, this is bad even by Chinese playbook standards.
Well, the Global Times tends to be on the more conservative side of the Chinese government. They're expressing a lot of the same kind of jingoistic rhetoric that is often portrayed in Indian television and media.
But not state-controlled media.
I disagree with it. I don't think that it is very productive on either side. So if it would be much better if both sides would ratchet down the vitriolic jingoism, as I said, and just let the process work.
No, but there is a huge difference, Einar Tangent. You talk about ratcheting down on both sides.
Between you saying
there is a difference. There is a difference because Global Times is only one example, but it is state-affiliated media. State-affiliated media in India is not doing that.
Give me another example. You say there are more than one. Which one? Did you see this on CGTN? Did you see this on CCTV? No, you saw it in one newspaper.
That doesn't blunt what I'm saying. It's still state-affiliated media. One example is enough.
You're saying because you said initially that there are others. So if you can't name them, then that's not true. We have to go back to this issue. That for every one,
I'm sorry, you can't escape that by. I will bring you more examples, but the fact is, Global Times happens to be state-affiliated media. Both the news agency itself, as well as its editor-in-chief, in his personal capacity, have been tweeting ugly, virulent things about the Indian military and the Indian government.
So has the Indian press.
That's the Indian free press. That's not state-affiliated press.
Free press.
There's a huge difference.
There's a difference between.
There's a huge difference.
If you're working for a Chinese newspaper and you feel that you've been antagonized by, quote, the Indian free press, unquote, it's not right for you to express your opinion.
Einar Tangent, are you suggesting that Global Times can say something if it is not permitted to do so by the Chinese government? That's ludicrous. Even you know that.
Well, you can say that, but I'm just telling you that they represent the far right side of the Chinese government. If you think that
there's no sides to the Chinese government. There's one side. It's the Chinese government.
Speaks with one voice. I think, well, then you should be able to supply me. Why isn't this on CGTN? Why isn't this on the other newspapers? Why isn't it? Is it on the Newswire?
Precisely because China likes to play these mind games with different kinds of. Different kinds of voices, because this is the same government this is the same kind of government that's also, talking at the ministerial level. There are corps commander level talks going on. This is the same country that sends out signals saying, let's try and scale back the tensions right now, and at the same time trying to dislodge Indian posts. So, let's not mistake one thing for the other here.
Well, let's not mistake one thing for the other is correct. Now, the amount of vitriol that is spewed almost on a daily basis from almost all the press entities within India makes it wonder how they can be saying the same thing at the same time.
Okay, so you're not going to agree with my point. You're making a false equivalence, but I'll leave it there for the moment.
Because you're not speaking sincerely. You say that it is the right of the free press to denigrate the Chinese, but you don't like it when somebody in China speaks back. Why is that?
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying
why can't they have a voice?
There is a huge difference between the free press and state-controlled media, because when the Global Times says it, it means that the Chinese government is having it said through a mouthpiece. No, I don't. Let's leave that point aside because we're going around in circles. I want to bring in the others as well. Sushant Sareen, there appears to be a heightened level of virulence since August the 29th. You know, specific words from the Chinese press, Global Times mostly, about tanks being destroyed, about Indian troops not being able to survive at these high altitudes. What do you think?
Look, there are a couple of things. Personally, I don't take Global Times seriously at all. Shiv, even during the Doklam crisis, we saw the kind of nonsense this editor, I don't know how he's become an editor, what kind of connections he has, what his USP is. But, he's a palpable idiot. But the point is that he's there and he does this propaganda. He says the most ridiculous things, and he also churns out, or his paper or his institution churns out blatantly racist stuff. You remember that one video which they churned out with a Sikh, and then, they were trying to lampoon a Sikh out there, and, okay, good, a Sikh represents India, and the Chinese are actually quite scared of the Sikhs because of what the Sikh troops did when, the Brits were occupying parts of China. But having said that, you remember all that propaganda he did. How did the whole thing end? So I take whatever Global Times says with a pinch of salt. I agree with what you are saying, that yes, they, because most of us don't read People's Daily, most of us don't read the other Chinese language thing. So our go-to option is Global Times, and I think that is what Global Times circulation is probably much more in India than anywhere else in the world. At least the eyeballs which they get. So to that extent, they use it for propaganda purposes. And yes, to the extent that you start taking it seriously and it starts affecting you, I think, it kind of serves their purpose. Of course, I don't see how a lot of us take it. A lot of us actually laugh at it. A lot of us, actually junk it. A lot of us don't even take it seriously. But that is as far as the Global Times is concerned. The rest of the videos and other stuff which they are churning out, and that kind of stuff, suddenly they come out with exercises in Tibet, and that's not just the Global Times, it's the other Chinese media also which comes out. They're not as vitriolic, they're not as vehement as Global Times, but nevertheless, I think the message which they are trying to give is that China is a far superior thing, power, the military is really clued in. Look, we are giving hot meals to our soldiers in all those fancy drones and all of that. Those are kind of things even we can show. What's the big deal in that? And maybe we need to start doing it. As I think the AGDPI did come up with a couple of videos which are pretty impressive. They showed paratroopers, jumping into the hills and all sorts of other stuff they showed, which is also effective. So that kind of propaganda can go on. Actually, the bottom line is, what happens if a shooting match starts? And that is what will tell you whether the Chinese are up to the mark or not. Until then, even Hollywood makes films, Bollywood makes films. I'm sure Chinese make all sorts of films. That's okay. That's part of the game. That's part of the psychological warfare, information warfare that happens all the time. But I think we should be a little circumspect about how seriously we take the Global Times.
Okay, fair enough. We should be circumspect in terms of how seriously we take the Global Times, just as China needs to be circumspect about certain warmongering that is perceived to be happening in the Indian free press, as Ainar Tanjan said. Mr. Tanjan, in the midst of such virulence, you're saying that it's happening in the Indian press. The Indian press has, eyes fixed on the Global Times, which I repeat is state-affiliated media. Are, discussions going to be allowed to happen? Because like I said, there is going to be another round of military-level talks right now, and it's difficult to ignore the atmosphere that has been created by outlets like Global Times.
Well, as you pointed out, this is the virulence is on both sides. For the Chinese, they take things very literally. So when they see so many news outlets in India saying things that we're going to teach China a lesson, we have our Mirage fighters in charge, we will not be toyed with, we will be respected, we will take strategic areas, we will force China to retreat, we will not be bowed. I mean, this kind of, this is silly. This is kind of things that I would expect of, 11-year-olds on the playground, basically making boasts about how they're going to beat the other guy up. We are adults. There is no point in having any kind of physical showdown. Body bags are not victories. They don't confer honor. All they do is tragic loss to the families of those involved. So at this point, I think it would behoove both sides to tone down the rhetoric. I mean, the Global Times was reacting to some sort of made-up movie showing Modi shooting down Chinese apps with with guns, as if this was somehow thing.
I have a full
the
report
Chinese
on that
take
coming
that
up.
very seriously. But I'm just saying that this type of thing is taken very, very seriously. Remember, for the Chinese, there's a difference in culture. They take news media very seriously, even though it's not meant to be. So when you say, well, China should understand us, well, you should understand China. That is part of the problem. There's two neighbors who have a massive cultural gap between them. And it behooves both to learn about each other. Not only India about China, but China about India.
Since you mentioned, Einar Tangent, since you mentioned the So Sorry episode that ran here on India Today that appears to have infuriated, well, certainly the people at Global Times, but whoever else, I want to play out a report for you because there are so many hypocrisies intertwined in what the Global Times has had to say. We couldn't resist putting out this reply. Take a look at this report. This is the episode that has them fuming, and here's everything you need to know about it. What a time to be alive. So Sorry, India Today's wildly popular political cartoon series, has hurt the Chinese establishment. So dear Global Times, or should we say Chinese government? Wait, it's the same thing. Well, here's our reply. First, welcome to the world of satire. We can empathize though. It's banned on your side of the fence. But if you stay tuned to So Sorry, we promise you'll pick up excellent alien nuggets about weird things like caricature, humor, maybe even democracy. Second, funny you should mention national sentiments. Because Modi ji's assault on those Chinese apps is actually modeled on PUBG, a game that you guys own and India has just banned. So, oops, was that an admission, Global Times? Third, Twitter is sort of banned in your country, isn't it? But then who said state-owned media doesn't have what you deny your own people? Speaking of Chinese national sentiments.
To reveal the global investigation that exposed the detention camps for them in China's Xinjiang.
Is called the greatest genocide of the 21st century.
Fourth, while we're thrilled you've joined the massive and growing So Sorry viewership base, we hope that your interest in terrorism will also bring you to our coverage of the Uyghur people on your land. And finally, guys, we've been telling you this for a while now. India today is not the India of 1962. Enjoy, and really, we're so sorry. Okay, so a bit of satire on India's award-winning So Sorry series, irking persons in China, including certainly the editor-in-chief of the Global Times. Sushant, you wanted to say something. You were raising your hand. Go ahead.
Look, I think, as far as satire goes, So Sorry takes digs at Indian politicians, including the Prime Minister and the Home Minister and everybody else. Now, the Chinese can't handle political humor, satire. That's their problem, number one. Number two, I think the Chinese system, the Chinese rulers are so insecure. Do you know Winnie the Pooh is banned in China? You can't have Winnie the Pooh cartoons because apparently there is some resemblance between the Chinese president and Winnie the Pooh. There was this cartoon of the Chinese president and Barack Obama walking together, and somebody juxtaposed it against one of the Winnie the Pooh cartoons. And suddenly Winnie the Pooh as a cartoon series is banned in China. Now, what does that tell you about... I don't think it has anything to do with Chinese culture. I think it has something to do with the insecurity of the Chinese ruling party, of the Chinese, the cabal which rules China. Because frankly speaking, if you go by what culture is, I think there are remarkable similarities between Indian and Chinese culture in our daily lives. The way we interact with each other, with our parents, with our friends, the way we invite our guests, the deities we worship, all of it, there are remarkable similarities. So for them to say that, our cultures are very different, the cultures are the same, but you have a really messed up political system where there is this party, this clique of people which actually brutalizes its own people, which stifles dissent, which actually carries out genocide against people, especially in some of the fringe areas like Xinjiang and others, in Tibet, for example. And then they say that, look, don't say anything because, you don't understand us.
Great point,
frankly speaking, we will not understand you if you are going to be doing what you are doing. If you have this bunch of people who are ruling over you and who carry out these kind of massacres, and suddenly you have this great man, the great helmsman Mao, who killed, how many people did he kill? Some millions of people.
Let's get Einar Tangent to respond to that. Einar Tangent, this is not about Chinese culture. I mean, that's an easy sort of defense. This is about the insecurity of the Chinese leadership. Don't put this on the Chinese people and Chinese culture. It is about the leadership and the government.
Well, quite frankly, I disagree with you. And, this idea that somehow disrespecting the Chinese people is good for relations, you can have that opinion. I don't think it works. Now, I remember when Modi was going to China, and there was a number of shows, including yours, that was talking about they must respect India. They must respect Modi. He's our leader. We will not stand for any disrespect. And all I see at this point is respect of Chinese culture, the Chinese leadership. It's interesting. It's always easier
There's no disrespect of Chinese culture.
Other people, but it's
there is no disrespect of Chinese culture. I know.
Now, in terms of, listen. I mean, what do you know of Chinese culture? When were you last here? How many years did you spend here? How much have you studied? Do you know the language?
Talk about
somebody from China came to India and started leveling the same kind of broad generalities, making caricatures of Indians and saying, oh, Indians don't understand this and that, they're not cultured.
You've sacrificed the Chinese people to protect the insecurities of the Chinese leadership. That's 11-year-old logic.
If you want to talk about sacrifice,
it's ironic.
It's
ironic that you're talking about that.
Kashmir. How many people have died
now
in
you're going to just jump between topics. That's jumping topics. You can talk about a lot.
I don't know what Xinjiang had to do with the global times.
I talked about Chinese culture, and you asked me how many times I've been to China. That shows you're slipping. Okay.
Kashmir.
I want to. No, this is not a debate about Kashmir. This is not a debate about Kashmir. Let me bring in Lieutenant General.
Why are you bringing in Xinjiang?
Okay.
Why would you do that?
Talk about Kashmir. Let's talk about Kashmir.
Sushant, respond. Then I want to bring in General Jaswal. He's been waiting.
Very quickly.
Quick
somebody
point.
who claims to be an American, but actually behaving like an advocate of the Chinese, I'm quite surprised. Let's talk about Kashmir. If this guy doesn't know what has happened in Kashmir, what the kind of terrorism...
No, I'm asking you, what is happening? How many people have died in the last 3 years?
You've had your say, right? You've had your say. You want to talk about Kashmir? Let's talk about Kashmir. Although you claim that you are an American, but you are obviously an advocate for the Chinese. But let's talk. What have your puppets in Pakistan done?
You can always make personal attacks on me if you don't want to discuss the issue.
It's not a matter of personal attack. If
I
somebody calls
understand
you a
that.
Chinese, you
if
say
you don't
you're
have
an
something positive to say,
somebody calls you a
about
Chinese, you
your
say you are an
own point of
American.
view,
Okay.
attacking the other person.
One at a time. Let Sushant finish. Einar, I'll come to you.
Of the Chinese, right? And when you talk about Kashmir, you're basically doing advocacy of the Chinese. So let's talk about it. What have the Pakistanis done? Do you know how many people have died in Kashmir and how many of them have been killed by the terrorists in Kashmir? Now, if you don't have those figures, I don't think you should talk about Kashmir. You should
Okay,
talk about
okay.
Kashmir
You should tell
because,
me how many people there.
because almost 70 to 80% of the casualties in Kashmir have been carried out by the terrorists.
Since 370,
We've had
how many people have died?
So let me jump in here. Let me jump in here, gentlemen. Gentlemen, let me jump in here. Sushant's responded to you, but this is not a debate about Kashmir. Since you mentioned it, Sushant had a right to respond to that. General Jaswal, no, I'm sorry. No, it's part of the conversation. You talked about Chinese culture. You talked about Chinese culture. State-affiliated media accused the Indian... State-affiliated media accused India of indulging in terrorism, or the Indian Free Press of indulging in terrorism. We merely showed a mirror back at you. Einar Tangent, no, I'm sorry. We showed the mirror back to you. If that's unpalatable to you, I'm going to have to go to the next guest. General Jaswal, what do you make of this current atmosphere? What do you make of this current atmosphere, the virulence of the propaganda? You've heard the Chinese gentleman speak as well, and this happens right before the Corps Commander level talks. I want to bring it back to the ground for a moment here. General Jaswal.
Yeah. First of all, psychological warfare is a very important element of military strategy of China. And that's the reason it has got cyber warfare units as part of the organization. Now, as far as the government is concerned, Global Times undoubtedly has been the mouthpiece of China as far as psychological warfare is concerned. I would like to quote, even in 2008 or so, was it? Yes. That's a time Global Times had said that time has come to break up India into 20 smaller states. So that India is destroyed. This is the kind of rhetoric, which starts off with Global Times. Now, I will also go back to 62 war, how psychological warfare is played. Way back in March 62, the first statement which came out from China was, don't play with fire. They were threatening India. In August, it said, don't play with fire, you will get burned. Now, all these theatrics which are going on, all these kind of, Bollywood movie types of tank versus tank battle, etc., this is nothing but trying to create a psychological impact on the Indian soldiers. Our Indian soldiers are too well hardened. Secondly, with due respect to Mr. Einar, I just want to say something. Mr. Einar, it is unfair. If China says something to India, we are supposed to absorb it. If we respond something in our defense, well, China is supposed to take it very seriously. That's your viewpoint. I don't think countries deal that way. Everyone takes his honor, his country's honor very seriously. It has been the fault of China that it's got a philosophy of the palm and the 5 fingers, of which Ladakh is one of them. And as part of that philosophy, has come in now. And now it is saying, oh, I'm a holy cow. No way. I have been to China for 14 days on official visit. And let me assure you one thing. I went to Inner Mongolia for a huge exercise which was there as an observer, as part of the delegation. Well, the kind of tactics, the way that armored formation was being used out there, the present Army Commander, Northern Command, was the defense attaché out there, General Joshi. He was a colonel. I called him. I said, if this is the way they are fighting, I think it is a hell of a low level of tactical thinking. Another DA from another country, he came, I wouldn't name the country, he says, Joe, that's what now General Joshi, if this is the way the Chinese are going to fight with the armored formations, you need not fear an enemy. That sums up the entire, this psychological warfare which you're trying to portray out there.
Okay.
Let me tell you, we have got distinct advantage in Ladakh as far as mechanized warfare is concerned.
Okay.
Let China.
I just want to pick up on one of those important point. As far as advantage or disadvantage, that may be for a separate day. But about the things that have been said on both sides and the way the other side is receiving it, would you like to answer that, Einar? General Jaswal says, you know, you sort of talk about how the Chinese people take things very seriously. What about India? Do you think India doesn't take what China says seriously and doesn't get offended by the things that the Chinese say?
Yes, I would say. I mean, the Chinese, the Indian press does not take anything very seriously in terms of what China says. I would argue, that the general is right. Both sides should take what each side says very seriously. Now, you like to say it's a free press. They can say anything they want, all right? And that's fine. But for the Chinese, that does not translate well. They're used to a press which says what the government wants them to hear. Now, the Global Times, remember, is not aimed at the internal audience. It's aimed at the external audience, right? They get angry just like you get angry, and they respond. Unfortunately, this is not the right approach. A tit for tat will get you nowhere except more tit for tats. So at this point, it's time to break the cycle, start having adults in the room, discuss how to solve this, as opposed to how to ratchet up feelings and try to justify it.
Sushant Sareen, is that going to be possible right now? I'm not even going to get into, who's perhaps more to blame for this current atmosphere, given that everything that we've seen happen in Ladakh has been completely at China's initiative. So this whole question about adults in the room is a little far-fetched in my view. But do you think it's going to be possible for quote-unquote adults in the room to talk this out in this current atmosphere?
Look, in principle, yes. But let's see what is happening on the ground. Things had supposedly been sorted out when Galwan happened. You kill 20 people and then you expect that everybody in India is going to keep quiet because, 20 people died. And you keep quiet about how many of yours died, but that's okay. That is your system. You want to hide it, good for you. But you don't expect, now you will say, why did the Indians even mention that 20 people had died, had been brutally done down by the Chinese before they were given a taste of their own medicine? You could very easily say that you should have kept quiet about it, but that's not what we do. We would celebrate the supreme sacrifice that the soldiers made for the country. If you don't want to do it, that's your problem. But the fact of the matter is who started it. And it's very important about who started it. And for the Chinese to then say that, let's talk about it as adults in the room. You talk about something as adults in the room, and then on the ground you try and do something sneaky to change facts on the ground. How does that work? How many times do you think we are going to fall for that nonsense time and time and time again? Your president comes out here, there is a sense that both countries are going to move forward, and then suddenly you hear that while he's out here, the PLA starts moving in and starts encroaching upon Indian territory. What do you expect us to make out of what you say as adults in the room and what you do as puerile fellows on the ground? How do you expect us to react to it? Do you expect us to keep quiet and keep turning the other cheek as many of your other smaller neighbors are wont to do? How does that work?
It really, I have time for one last question, Ainar Tangent. It goes back to that. It's all very well to say, both sides should behave like adults in the room, but it really goes back to where this all started. And there's no doubt about where it all started.
And where is that?
Chinese aggression in eastern Ladakh. The continuous attempt to create
I would go back a little bit further.
Huge deployment.
I would say the redrawing of the maps, Article 370, and senior ministers from the government on the floor of the Lok Sabha, your parliament, declaring that they will never rest until areas currently held by China, Asaki Chin, were back in the possession of India. So if you want to take this argument that everyone should take things seriously, that the government should be taken seriously, then why wouldn't the Chinese take this seriously? Why wouldn't that, in combination with the road, with the attacks on Chinese apps, why wouldn't this be taken seriously by China?
In other words, it's not going to be possible to have an atmosphere for talks to actually continue in a normal manner because China does not believe it has done anything wrong. No, nothing was done that has changed anything significantly as far as Aksai Chin is concerned, Einar Tangent. So that's a highly rhetorical argument that you're making as far as Article 370 is concerned. So I'm gonna end on that note here on Newstrack. I want to thank all of our guests because this is a story that's going to continue right through this week. The core commanders of both sides will be holding their 6th round of talks later this week, and we'll be keeping very close track. All indications are that the atmosphere is not going to be conducive at all. We're taking a very quick break. We're back with much more.